Hey everybody, I'm Ron Diebert. I'm the director of the Citizen Lab here at the Monk School at the University of Toronto. And I'm really glad to welcome my good friend Dan Deudney here. I'm going to just keep my remarks very brief by saying that there's no other person that's been such an important inspiration for my own professional work than Dan Deudney. Many years ago when I was a young graduate student, I came across this monograph from the World Watch Institute called Whole Earth Security. And when I read it, I was completely blown away. And so I reached out to Dan, and we've been friends and colleagues ever since. Over many, many phone calls, I've heard Dan give variations of this presentation today. You're in for a great treat, let me tell you that. So that's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Professor Bernstein.
Enjoy. Thanks so much, Ron, and welcome everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dan, and I'll be chairing the talk. For those of you who don't know him, he is a professor who teaches political science, international relations, and political theory at Johns Hopkins University. And I will say, like Ron, and I think anyone who knows Dan, that he's been influential in my thought as well. So I'm co-director of the Environmental Governance Lab, and some of Dan's early work, I mean, Ron's described it as, whole Earth security, but his influence in many areas, including in the environment and environmental governance, is well known, and in fact Dan was one of the pioneers in this area. So before people were really thinking about the environment and global environmental issues, Dan was on the leading edge of this. And his early work that I know is his work on environmental security, where he really defined an entire field that is having great influence now, but at the time it's just something people weren't really thinking about. And just sort of to put this in context, say whole Earth security and environmental security, this is a trademark of Dan's, that it's thinking about macro structures, thinking about these questions that we might think about day to day, but putting them in the broadest context and thinking about humanity and the world as a whole and how the pieces fit together. I gather, I've not had many conversations, but that this talk will focus on that. Just a couple of other words about Dan. He's written a great deal. He's published on the end of the Cold War and liberal international order. One of his books, Bounding Power, Republican Security Theory from the Polis to the Global Village, was the co-winner of an award, the Jervis Schroeder Prize, for the best book in international politics and history by the American Political Science Association, and co-winner of not just the Book of the Year, but the Book of the Decade from the International Studies Association. So we're going to hear today about his current project titled Getting Earth Right, Global Village, Spaceship, Earth, and Gaia, etc., revisited. Dan, take it away, and we're going to let Dan speak for, I guess, as long as he wants, and then there will be some time for Q&A, which I'll try to moderate.
Great. Well, thank you. It's great to be back in Toronto. Ron Diebert, an old friend, and as I guess everyone in this room knows, and many other people all over the earth, has been in the cutting edge of, a very important part of the cyber governance question, and has been a great inspiration for me. I remember when the Citizen Lab was basically an idea that he had, and I've seen over the steps the long and the hard work that's really created a center of global influence and excellence right here at the University of Toronto. I'd also like to say, by way of beginning, that this talk is dedicated to Nathan Sears, and Nathan just finished his doctorate in the department. He had a terrific dissertation about catastrophic existential threats, which is what this is about. I was fortunate to have been on the committee and Indeed, I organized the panel that was at the ISA in Montreal that he went to, and then he was actually killed at the ISA in Montreal at an Airbnb fire. And so this is a horrible event, but I wanted to note how sad that is, that he was really a major voice that was just, starting on the path to what might have been a career of tremendous promise and influence. So today we are going to do so. This is what this basically is a third of a book that I'm trying to write kind of forever. And the book is entitled Home Rules, Planetary Earth, Machine Civilization, and Republican World Orders. And what this is kind of the beginning and the middle, which is kind of the setup for the stuff I'm not going to talk about today, which is about republicanism. It's at least as long as this, and layering republicanism into what I'm all about to say is a larger project. Today is really, let's see, okay. I guess the most important starting point would be that there's this recognition that has now become like a zeitgeist that the human future, the where we're headed, possibilities that we're now aware of, possibilities that we're creating, have existential consequences potentially for humanity. We've thought about the end of humanity throughout history. Now we know, ways in which it might occur, and we now know ways in which things we are doing might cause it to occur. And just a short list, nuclear war remains the real possibility because we have this enormous apparatus that is prepared at an instant's notice to essentially obliterate industrial, urban civilization and catastrophically wreck the biosphere. Then we have climate change, the alterations that I'm sure everyone is familiar with, that is really just gathering, and there's going to be all of these perturbations and the sea level rising, et cetera. And then we have the possibility of asteroidal collision that we hadn't previously known about. We have various ideas of pandemics. I'm not sure I really like this because it's sort of a space satellite thing, but viruses. And then we have, in the same biological domain, transhumanism and human being superseded in certain ways, and then the possibility of artificial superintelligence of a machine that would basically be for human practical purposes like God on this planet. And so we look at these technological possibilities and we wonder, and we have been wondering, and in each of those topics and several others, there has been, debate that goes back and speculation and people doing various things. And so this is not like a new set of discoveries, but it is remarkably out of focus in a certain way, that these threats and others have, a common logic to them, and also have, a common requirement that humans have to do the right thing. That we are going to have a terminal, outcome here unless we get things right, unless we figure out, what paths that we can take that are consistent with our survival, and then implement those, right? This is a tall order, but that's where we are. Now, I use this language of terrapolitan debate to refer to the fact that what I'm about to say here and all these points here, are not really new to me. This is a synthesis. People have been basically making, points of this sort, and we've been getting, accreting more and more, sophistication and understanding of them And there's been this ineffective debate that we don't sort of recognize as having been going on about, what are these realities, descriptive disputations, and then of course the question of, well, what is the polity? What is the political answer to this? And so the Terrapolitan debate, should be at the center of all of our thinking, of all of our curriculum, of all of our political action, and getting the right answers to it, is something that our survival may require. We have one of the things about this type of argument is that you have a lot of sort of conceptual material that I try and put into these things. And I talk about three different Earths, archipelago Earth, from the beginning, until the beginning of agriculture, and then a long period of agricultural society. Then, 5 centuries ago, the beginning of globalization in the more common sense of the term, oceanic navigation, so on, marked, you see, by closure for the first time everyone is in contact. And then I think in the middle years of the 20th century, we have crossed over an important divide into what I like to think we should call planetary Earth. And it's interesting that in that decade there, the sort of mid-1940s to mid-1950s, there was a real series of revolutionary, fundamentally transformative technological possibilities that were brought forth. Nuclear weapons, we went from 1935, science says this can't be done, to 1955, a globally deployed network of hydrogen bombs and all of the support apparatus for it. Like overnight, right? Quick weaponization, and that still remains a defining feature. But this is also rockets and satellites, first objects to go beyond the Earth's atmosphere. This is digital computers, ENIAC and MANIAC, and this is 1953, DNA is mapped, and then we have the beginning of the so-called Great Acceleration, when human numbers and human economic activity, and hence human ecological footprint, begins to soar. So we're in a different situation that's marked by vulnerability, high levels of interdependence, and mutual vulnerability to all of these systems and their deployments. One of the things that I think we can sort of put the overall picture on here is that the the larger pattern of human history since the agricultural revolution, perhaps even before would be way out here. But basically, we've had some parts of the world, get more orderly and progress, while others, decline. But sort of overall, and then the beginning of the modern era, the Baconian civilization, Enlightenment civilization, we begin to get this great, and of course it's uneven, it's not represented clearly there. And we have come, to the present, and the fan of the future has got, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts to it. And 2 of them, utopia always had talked about, extinction, intellectually aware of, but now those 2 have been added to the set of possibilities that are within the scope of our agency. That was not the case before, right? And that makes this period fundamentally different. And I might note that one of the reasons, what I see as an overall pattern here, is that the steps to take us to utopia are some of the same steps that, if they're not or become missteps, they take us to extinction. And so there is this double-edged sword, character to the technologies that would potentially take us up. Now, this talk is not going to be about the politics of it. It's going to be about the geography of all of this. I'm basically going to, encourage you to adopt the mindset of a sort of naive geographer. We're going to bracket, all of the questions about the agendas and the purposes that led to the creation of what we have in terms of a material world. And we're just going to look at that material world. We're going to do a geography. And this is something that has been, central to human affairs all along. Everyone has a mental map, that they use to get around, and our political views are often infused with mental maps of one sort or another. And this task of doing geography that's so essential to our character as beings and our whole world, everything we do, is important. Why? Because it's the necessary foundation for practical agency. And this is a nice quote that I recently came across. If we could first know where we are and whither we are tending, we could then better judge what to do and how to do it. And we might turn this around and say, we can't judge what to do or how to do it until we know where we are and where we're headed. Right? Now, I wish it were the case that we had complete agreement about this, but what we have are, this is the outline to the bulk of the talk here. Everything else that I'm going to say, is on this list. And since the middle years of the 20th century, roughly, there have been various proposals, in effect, various images, various metaphors, analogies that have been drawn and been widely, disseminated and discussed, and that these become sort of the locus for a conversation about where things are, and also always entering into these conversations about where we want to go and where we can potentially go. And these are kind of alternative mental maps, and they are emphasizing here that we're just naive empiricists. We're basically going to look, at the phenomenon that has given rise to these characterizations of the actual geography of our situation. Now, we would start, I think, appropriately, the Anthropocene. There's different meanings of this. I read an article not long ago that had 86 different definitions of the Anthropocene have already been, proposed, and there's all of this. The humanities scholarship community has been particularly active in this. But basically, it's the age of man, okay? And the geologists first started talking about this, that humans were now a force that was registering, in the planetary geology, that, for centuries, millennia, millions, billions of years, the record of what we are now doing, would be preserved. And of course, climate change and the loading of the atmosphere is part of that. Also radionuclides. Once we started detonating nuclear weapons in the atmosphere, we were spewing all over the planet these very odd atoms that are not, present in nature, but they stand out. They emit rays, and they can be detected in, parts per billion. It's everywhere. Okay, every one of our bodies has got, a couple of plutonium atoms. We also have, the wave of what I refer to as the anthroplex, and this is a term that I have coined, and basically what I mean by the anthroplex is the sum of all of the gizmos, of all of the infrastructures, of all of the artifacts, of all of the fabricated materials that humans have produced. And the reason there is an Anthropocene is because there's an anthropoplex, right? And the reason we've moved into planetary Earth and have these various catastrophic risks that are our own making has to do with with the anthroplex. And so a central theme of my thinking on this, and I see it as a very hopeful characterization of it, which is that the key to a good Anthropocene, we're stuck in the Anthropocene, right? We can't get out of it unless we want to commit suicide or, shrink down into, a tiny population. And we already have this immense footprint already. The key to a good Anthropocene is getting the anthroplex right, of configuring stuff right. And in each of these domains is a question of the governance and the configuration of these things we produce. Well, just to sort of run through, perhaps not in exactly right order, but we have this system of communications, of physical infrastructure, now of fiber optics. We have the cities that we can see from in the night, from space. We've actually ringed the planet, with all of these amazing machines that are hurtling around at high speeds. There's the railroad net, and then that final figure in the top there is is New York City from space. Cities, are these big nodes in the anthroplex. And of course, all of these, figures that we see here, these mappings, don't do justice to the fact that the material from which the railroads were built, or the fiber optic cables were built, or the electricity coming here, has been extracted from the earth, and that we have taken parts of the natural earth and reconfigured it in these various ways. So its extent is even greater than this would suggest. And of course, there is also all the pollution that comes from it. I'm startled by this figure. The estimate is that there are 720 trillion pieces of plastic, small plastic, in the ocean. Right? And so we've not only got the radionuclides in it, everyone has got little pieces of plastic in them. And the estimate is that the total quantity will double in 6 years. And so there's that as well going on. And so I like this image here on the left. This was just put together today, I'm embarrassed to say. But this picture on the left here is, I think, kind of metaphorically, illustrative that this is a quarry, of course, and that machine down there is, a large machine apropos a human body. And that's kind of, at best the scale that we are, that, we are, tiny, within this overall, entity that is here before us, and we're sucking things out, as well as ripping things out with our machines. So let's talk about, how we became global and planetary Earth. This is something that in some sense is part of everyone's knowledge, what people learn in school, but it's interesting to just go over. People say, the 20th century, global, planetary, and people are increasingly using that as the category. But these categories for understanding or describing the largest features of the human world are an early modern fabrication, an early modern discovery. There had been very diverse astronomies before this time. Some of them had made this argument, but the evidence came forth for this position that the Earth is not the center of the universe, as was thought, that this was this transformation in this larger context of the human. And then we've had this slow but sure unrolling of the map. We have, explored and gone out, and done geography. We've been getting a better map, of the terrestrial, realm in which we emerged and are interacting. And we come into the contemporary period, and you have, another sort of image of the magnitude of the network of the machines that are enveloping. We have to always, keep the space part of this story, because it was discoveries in astronomy that basically leads to our recognition that we are on a planet. Okay, from the Latin for wandering, there were these 5, stars that wandered in the across the background of the fixed stars, and there had been, well, what are these? And this was this great effort. People focus on this and think that there were signals from divine forces, or one's destinies could be read, in the motions of these 5 little points of light. Okay, which as a percentage of these people's sensible environment was really small. Okay, and the Copernican revolution gives us this transformation in the understanding that it is a planet, that it is hurtling through a void at fantastic speeds, and that it is globular, spherical in shape. It is an orbit. It is an orb that is in an orbit, in Kepler's language, and so this process of exploring the Earth, has continued into across the 20th century, and we, various pieces of this story. That we know, everyone, science of space and astronomy, it's been so fabulous. And we see these distant objects and these primordial forces. And what I ask the astronomers is, okay, which of the discoveries that have been made over these several centuries, all this effort, are the most important, really? And I don't think that, in one sense, the Big Bang and the ultimate heat death of the universe and supernovas and the dying of the sun in a 500 million years, the recognition of this much larger tapestry of matter in motion within which the Earth it came to exist and will eventually be perished. That's all astounding. The crown jewel of our civilization that we have seen all of this. But the most practical parts of what has been discovered have not really been put, I think, appropriately at the top of the list. And at the top of the list would be, this is a phrase, an expression from Carl Sagan, Oasis Earth, that the finding is that that Earth in the cosmos is a very special place, right? That within trillions and trillions of miles in all directions, is this incredibly inhospitable, realm that, there might be bacteria, down in the crust of Mars and so forth, but there's no Metazoic life. There's no complex, functionally differentiated life of the sort that we see here. A spoonful of good farmland topsoil that had an ant or two in it or a worm would have far more complexity than the rest of the solar system combined, right? Because, Jupiter is vastly larger than the Earth, right? But it's basically a set of chemicals, that have been sort of recombining and, swirling around, physics and chemistry. It explains it all, okay? We've got biology, and not just some biology, right? We've got this incredible explosion, right? That the Earth, within trillions and trillions of miles, is this oasis, right? And of course, it emerged on its own, and we are in it, and our survival depends on it. And this next point here is the pale blue dot. That's another Sagan product. Somewhere in there, it doesn't really show up, is the Earth, at distance, is taken by a satellite. Not a satellite, but a probe moving out into the outer solar system. But we also recognize that we have a geography of the Earth that is more than just the lithosphere and the hydrosphere and the atmosphere. There's also what I call an astrosphere. Every planet has an astrosphere where the planet's gravity and magnetic fields dominate. And those are, features of the planetary geography. Now, as part of this great re-exploration of the Earth, the sort of rediscovery of the Earth, has been a revolution in Earth system science. In the past we had the geologists did the rocks, the lithosphere, oceanographers do the hydrosphere, water. Then we have a study of the atmosphere, and the ecologists and the biologists study the biosphere. What we now know, and this is the great revolution, and we characterize this as a revolution in the same way that the Copernican revolution was a revolution. I hate to use this language, overused, of a paradigm shift, that everything is now understood as part of a fundamentally different schema. And so this is the revolution in Earth system science. We now have, this is not right quite yet. Yeah, okay. We have this revolution, and we understand, that we can't make sense of the atmosphere without understanding life. Why is there all this oxygen? Well, it comes from life. What about the rocks? The rocks have been shaped by life, all along, not just the big fossils that we see, but the materials that life, basic bacterial, fungal, algae type life have been altering the Earth long before we came. And of course, they made the planet habitable. They made the planet such that entities like us could potentially emerge. Right? And that's, going along with this next picture here, the discovery of deep time, that this is one entity that has been co-evolving, that has all of these parts to it, and there are periodic ruptures. There are periodic perturbations of first order change, mass extinctions, and the context from space, the asteroids, eruptions from the sun, and so forth, have been continuously shaping this. And then look here on the final slide there, the bounty of Oasis Earth. We have this tree of life, and this is kind of the modern version of that. The attempt by biologists to sort of schematize all of the different life forms on the planets, the groupings of them, and what their relationships to one another are. Now, so we've been learning all of this about the Earth, and it's notable that when modern astronomy started in the 17th and 18th century, in the wake of the Copernican revolution, there was this widespread presumption that the other bodies in the solar system not only had life, but they had intelligent life. Right? Martian, we populated Mars fictionally with, the succession of different, imaginaries, and then when that turned out to not be the case, it just gets pushed out further, and so we have people like Carl Sagan, again in mid-1960s, saying this galaxy contains between 50,000 and 1 million technological civilizations. I don't think that there's very good grounding for that, and that's within the study of astrobiology, which there should be a slide here actually about, is that the rare Earth hypothesis prevails, that the Earth, as the original version, Ward and Brownlee, that at most a handful of planets in this galaxy will have Metazoic life. Right? So this is a very special place, where we live, and when species go extinction on this planet, it's an event of probably galactic significance. Right? Now, once we come to this realization, we're looking at the mirror now. This is the big discovery, about the Earth, its specialness, along with its vulnerability, and then the question is, well, what are we going to do? And of course, one path is to say, well, we better make sure that this place doesn't get screwed up. This is it. We have our vocation now. The vocation of humanity is to be the guardians of of Oasis Earth. The other reaction, which is not incompatible with it, but very different, is, well, we better expand. We better become a multi-planetary species. And this giant, desert of the cosmos is waiting for us to come and bring Earth-originated life. And the descendants of Earth-originated life. And the spreading of that across the galaxy becomes the primary vocation, right? All of which comes from, the recognition of this kind of fact here, of this definite fact. Okay, let's see. I think we have to go back. Yes. Now, I've used this language of Gaia, and Gaia is a term that's been used to refer to this, at least the life part of this, that over time, has been manipulating the planet, okay? The reason the planet is habitable is because life has been making it habitable, right? And there are these feedback mechanisms. Why isn't it, hotter than it is? The sun has been getting successively warmer. Some sort of mechanism has been to compensate for that. Why is the level of salt been continuous in the world's oceans for probably billions of years? There's a lot of things we don't actually know in answers to these questions about how these systems have actually produced this situation of habitability, right? And that should be very sobering to us. Buckminster Fuller uses language that we are in Spaceship Earth, and of course it's not Spaceship because we didn't build it, okay? But we clearly are on this very complex artifact that has ship-like, we're whizzing through space, but as he says, there's no operating manual. Not only is there no operating manual, there's no blueprint, okay? We don't actually know how what our life depends on works, right? Let alone how to alter it. So we have Gaia, and Gaia becomes this super object, this hyper object, the combination of life on this planet, the gazillions of individual organisms, viruses, bacteria, the case of the human being, the human body has some 10 trillion cells of a human organism, but there's an estimated 100 trillion bacteria in the human body, about the size of our brains, scattered about mainly in our digestive systems. So it's a giant symbiotic system. Every organism is an ecosystem. Every ecosystem is, in an ecosystem that's shaped by all of this. So what is the level of complexity? Beyond our ability to calculate, okay? But we're in this thing, okay? We are living within what is a type of organism, a type of meta-organism. And so as people have been talking about this, what about this mother image? Gaia is that it's sort of, a nurturing, and certainly that is a face of it. But there's also the Medea hypothesis, which is also based on, important Earth history, that every so often, there's this sort of change that the life entity, for example, invents photosynthesis, which is catastrophic for all of the organisms that had been there before, right? And we may be like that. So if it is a mother, we're still in bed, and just a casual rolling over in her sleep might wipe us out, as it wipes out other organisms. There's a sort of indifference, and it ranges from friendliness to complete hostility on the basis of emergent properties in this incredibly complex system, right? So the personification of this, as being nurturing-like is problematic. And so what is our position in this? Are we parasites? And parasites, of course, can live in stable relationships with hosts, if they get the sort of intake and outtake, in an equilibrium. Or given the rate at which we have been expanding and all these nodes and all of this, metastasizing, is this are we the cancer of Gaia? Are we the cancer of the Earth that is basically growing in ways that will, kill the entity eventually? And I always think of Ron when we come to number 3 here, is this, the beginning of a sort of new functional differentiation within life, that the emergence of an intelligent life and the sort of, the networking of it together with these physical artifacts, is a sort of global brain that, would be able potentially over time. James Lovelock talked about this, the nova scene, that artificial superintelligence, working with humanity would become, the stewards of the Anthropocene, ad infinitum. That we have this sort of destiny, or potential anyway. Or will we see ourselves as an embryo, as something that is still in an early phase of formation? And this, would be the silicon succession, the idea that there is within this organism a kind of now artifact organism that will become intelligent and do what? I mean, here the narrative of the space people, kind of picks up that, that technology is part of life. Technology is the next step in the evolution of life. And humans were this important stepping stone to get this type of technology going. But once it does, it is part of the life destiny, and that the planet's brain gives it potentially enormous longevity that it otherwise wouldn't have. Right? And then the embryo, like a chrysalis, will we kill our mother, when we fully are born, or would we, sort of be born and then go off? All of these, you see, you can, this conversation about the geography, immediately leads to these alternative paths, you see, of what the species is and might do. So we got that already. Okay, so the next down our list would be back to the Anthroplex. We have built a kind of distinctive, artifact system of the Anthroplex. People have used this language: global brain, world brain, new sphere, and this is, of course, this digital, thing that we are creating. And this is a point where you always want to sort of pause and note, the sort of physical characteristics of this. The information technotron is a term that I think is useful here, that you have, a physical apparatus with internal communication speeds of approximately the speed of light. So it's all, small in a fundamental way, but it's enormously large, certainly large in the sense that it's everywhere on the planet. And it certainly is everywhere on the planet if we take into account the way in which the electromagnetic spectrum has been colonized by human artifact. As we sit here in this room, there are radio waves that are, passing through us and everything here, radio waves upon which have been etched, astounding quantities of information. Right? We're also connecting this, cybernetic nervous system to all the things on the planet that are increasingly, directed by or, partially controlled by. And the internal, features of this, one of them is the speed, the quantities of information that everything has been digitalized. We have this explosion of sensors. Everything is, the cost of a reproduction and a preservation of a cluster of information is like right around zero, okay? And so there's this explosive quantity of it that's being produced. Everything that had been done in the past, photographs, visuals, etc. This is the, the library, of human, psychic, product, and all of our dopey cat pictures, etc., etc. Right? It's got now this, this life to it, this presence to it. And then, of course, with regard to the sort of largest dimensions here, this physical artifact of all of these things connected together, It's not more complex than Gaia. Gaia clearly has more parts, but it actually is more extensive than Gaia because it has colonized the astrosphere. Right? And this is the sort of trajectory of this, of course, and why has this happened? We all know this, Moore's law, the doubling in very short periods of time. It's been operating for 55 years. You continue the trend analysis, and you're basically getting, various forms of machine intelligence that, are equivalent to humanity and then, beyond. And so this is the artificial superintelligence, is a possibility that's latent, it seems, in this, this information technotron that is this odd feature of the Anthroplex. Then we would also want to bring in the fact that, hey, not only have we, built this civil infrastructure. I mean, what does the Anthroplex do? It's basically a service, for human, wealth and power and commodious living. It's been all configured for that purpose, right? And we've had great progress, in that area. There's been all these cities built and all of this accumulation. Look at these wonderful buildings, and we have all of these machines that service us in all these various ways, right? And that's all been good. But we have also built another kind of mirror machine that is planetary in its scope, exploiting all of these, new technological advances, and it's like a planetary suicide vest. It's like having in your house, crates of dynamite. Well, there's several tons of TNT equivalent, for every man, woman, and child on the planet, and it's all, connected together, and it's prepared for instant demolition. So this is our civilizational demolition device that we have built. And once you start, describing it, you have to start laughing, because it's comedic, okay? There has been this is a really stupid thing to be doing, the total quantity of violence capacity, that we have from 1870 to 1970, from the age of Bismarck to the age of Kissinger. It's still realpolitik. It's still, we're going to get better. We're going to try and use power to dominate. The only thing that's changed is that, our sticks have become 9 billion times more powerful, okay? 9 billion times more explosive power in the hands of the great powers between 1870 and 1970, right? So this is kind of crazy, right? And it's like, we're going to talk about the village, but the proximity point here is you imagine that we are in a village or a neighborhood, and, we've got crates of TNT in our house, and we've got in our backyard a battery of howitzers and piles of ammunition, ready to bombard, people, that are down the block or in the next, area, if they, if our disputes become, significant, right? And so I put this on the list, and it's interesting that this has not been described in quite this way. And of course, the detonation of this we now know, and this is, again, part of the discovery, and it's been tied up with this Earth system science. One of the reasons we know so much Earth system science is because the nuclear weapons complex, the governments, and particularly the United States government, the bomb is invented, and so we need to know what happens when the bomb detonates, in space, in the atmosphere, on the ocean. We need to know how these radionuclides spread around, the planet. So oceanographers and geographers and seismologists, here's all this money. Go and figure, answers to this. And it was in the course of that type of research and the use of these powerful military computers for climate modeling that we discover, well, not only would we directly kill ourselves, but we would also indirectly kill ourselves by perturbances in the global biosphere, right? There's a whole list of ways. 1970s, the ozone layer gets depleted, nuclear winter, alterations in the temperatures on the planet, so that our extinction, would be an act of suicide, okay? But it would be a suicide, assisted by biospheric assault. Attempted murder is also implicated in this. And of course, this is another way in which we're all in the same boat, all common fate. And here's those dots are sort of major nuclear complexes. It is all over. And this is, an infrastructure. And here I'm actually, optimistic. I look at this and I say, well, this is basically insane, okay? And we can reconfigure this, in a quite straightforward manner. There's only so much fissionable material. Shrink it down, decouple it from these rapid transportation systems, lengthen the fuse. We need to debuild the bomb. Next, Spaceship Earth. This is an image that's been widespreadly used, and Barbara Ward, and of course Buckminster Fuller. And the ship imagery has, of course, been central to how we think about politics. It's in the Republic. The idea that the polity, is some sort of, whole that is in this larger space, and that unless, the right choices with regard to navigation, are chosen, disaster will befall all of us, okay? And we're in, a kind of all in the same boat, kind of situation, uneven in some regards, but, and of course we have this long experience with ships, and, there are different media, we have these ships, and this points out the way in which the Earth is not a ship. Okay, because, well, unless we have something like this, all right, which we're not going to do, the ship is not, it is moving, but it's moving on this track. It's basically, endlessly going around in a circle. So it's kind of like a mobile island, that's stuck on this path, right? And so the island metaphor is very misleading with regard to the notion that, well, we're going to sort of go off to Mars, or we're going to go off to interstellar space. We don't have that type of navigational choice. Obviously, we have a sort of metaphorical ones, and that's what this is often used for, and that we have to get, our habitat, we have to get our arrangement ship-shape, right? It's to a first approximation, it's a closed system. And of course, the other reason why this is problematic is because it implies a politics of hierarchy. That the ships that we have are all types of despotisms, and they're never full societies. They're always temporary societies in which everyone plays their role. It's a technocracy, right? And the bulk of the people are passengers, animate cargo for all practical purposes, right? And the survival depends upon the skill of the captain, the navigator, keeping the propulsion systems working, keeping everybody fed. There's always possibilities of storms, okay? There's also possibilities of outside threats that we're having to sort of, navigate through, right? Spaceship Earth. There might be another point there. Okay, so we're coming here to Global Village, and I'm near the end. This is not perhaps the best image to capture this fact, but when it comes to the kind of bottom line with regard to human politics and how we should think about this, this is, I think, that the best starting point. That we are in a small space, like with our homes and our neighborhood, a town, a village, small city, within that type of space is what we now are in. And what we need to do fundamentally is to start, behaving on a planetary scale the way we behave at the village scale or within the domicile scale, because that's where we are. And so there's a transposition of our kind of starting point politics, which actually we're pretty good at the smaller scale. And one of the things that we have at the smaller scale are conflict resolution systems. And also, we have building codes and zoning codes, and we regulate the design of the machines that our bodies are in intimate interaction with. And we're pretty good at that. We design safety into all sorts of things, and we have various regulations of how machines are fabricated. It's sort of idiot proofing, the stuff that we're around. Fool proofing, is another, term that captures it. And we do this on a routine basis, successfully. And basically, that's what we need to do, for the whole. And we need to recognize that we have, the equivalent of public works, of the sort of sewers and of the, the roadways and the various walls and the decisions about, where, the borders between your and mine are in this scale. And, we've done that, and we're very good at doing that. And that is what we have to basically be doing at a planetary scale. Now, there's one other part of this, and I might note that one of the reasons why republicanism is, for me, so appealing is because, well, first of all, republicanism is about the restraint on power on behalf of the whole, the people as a whole. And what is our new reality? Our new reality is a lot of empowerment, a lot of super empowerment. And so the notion that we would have a political tradition that's about restraining power would be particularly appropriate given all of these powers that have, leapt up in so many different ways. The other reason that republicanism is so appropriate is because republicanism is initially, and at its greatest strength, a municipal form of government. One in which more horizontal, arrangements of mutual restraint and authority prevail. And it's only in these larger scale systems where we've had these hierarchies, right? And this is to say that it's, world domestic politics is what we need. We need to behave, as if the planet is our home, right? The same things we do at home, we do with regard to the planet, because the planet is our home. So that's where the geography takes us in a sort of look ahead. Now, we have one more slide. So one of the features of this characterization that I've given us so far is that it's basically, as I said at the beginning, naive geography. We're going to go around and sort of look at where stuff is and the patterns of stuff. Okay, and that's all good. But we had bracketed the questions about the people in this, and one of the important things that has to be acknowledged that I try and capture in this imagery is history. That the human community, yes, did produce the Anthroplex, but it's been in a very uneven process. And one way of thinking about it is that this is like a river, okay, that's going to pour into the ocean, okay? And so time is on this, the flow is in this direction. And so for most of human history, in what I had earlier called archipelago Earth, humans are on these separate, slow-moving, tributaries, and they have little sort of clumps of debris that they're on, and sort of weaving towards raft and building a little ship capacity and sort of moving along. And they're interacting with one another, in these spaces, but they're not interacting across this. Then as we move across the agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, we have this great coming together, right? Globalization, interdependence, the closure of history on Earth. And it's all piled together, okay? It collided. And for most places, this collision over these 5 centuries was an unmitigated catastrophe. The New World, 90% of the human inhabitants were killed within a century of the Europeans' arrival. The Europeans who stumbled into these technologies and capabilities first didn't invent empire. They didn't invent colonialism. They just did it on this massively larger scale. Okay? And the world that we have today is fundamentally shaped by those asymmetries. And so I use this language of debris mat. These are really kind of 3 sort of metaphors of order is how it should perhaps be seen. The debris mat, overlaid with raft. And of course, the most raft-like parts of this are, well, like right here, it's in Northeast North America, and, the parts of the world where, things, run, where problems are solved. And much of the world is not like that. Much of the world is trying to get this way in important ways, all driven by the desire for material wealth and power. And then we have the ship. That's utopian for our situation. Right? We can't beach, our agglomeration and come up with a ship plan and then reconfigure it and then back out again. No, we're basically going to have to figure what is the minimum steerage capacity that we can generate with this, right? Now, why do we need steerage capacity? Well, because the river is continuing. We look ahead and it's hard to see into the future, but it's foggy, and we sort of hear a roaring. Are there going to be rocks? Are there going to be rapids? Right? We have to have futurism. We have to understand, where we're headed. Right? And if we don't get this right, we're going to, have these various major rocks, rapids. There is a path. There is a path through here. Okay, but that requires that this become more like this, that the raft craft is the best that we are going to be able to come up with within the time frames that we have. And we have been doing raft craft. Republicanism is raft craft. And if we can do that, if we can build, and this is, of course, the whole series of institutions and mutual feedback mechanisms institutionally that we talk about in these various realms, but it's all the reconfiguration of our village. It's all the reconfiguration of this very small space. And I leave, with kind of an admonition of challenge to the younger generation. The very beginning, this the zeitgeist of doom and all these different ways in which the earth can end, and democracy is in decline and blah blah blah, all true. But the reality is that the generation that is coming of age and will be, on this debris mat between now and the middle and later years of this century has a vocation that no previous generation has ever had. In the United States, people are always, America, American history, flags, all of this. And the Second World War looms very large, in this. And I forget who it was, talked about the greatest generation of that people from these remote areas and the Depression, and they got themselves together and they, accomplished these great things, And there's this notion that, that they were called, that history called them, that if they didn't do it, it wasn't going to get done. They didn't cause it, but they had to solve it, okay? And that's the situation of the generation that we have now. The possibility of being really the truly greatest generation, because you won't just be saving, liberal democracy, in the West, you'll be saving, the prospect of humans and our civilization continuing to exist. So this is the greatest challenge in history. This is the greatest opportunity. If your generation is successful in doing that, your generation will be, throughout the remainder of history, or at least for a very long period of time, seen as this moment, seen as, the founders of the Terrapolitan Republic, of the raft with enough steerage capacity to pull us through the storms that are coming. The end.
Okay. Wow. Well, thank you very much. That was, an amazing talk, and I'm certainly not going to try to summarize or comment, except to say that it's, this was just an amazing tour of, I guess, the way you're characterizing these geographies of our predicament, each leading us maybe, I don't know, to think about it in different ways and where we go. But I'm going to open it up to the floor for questions and helping us think through some of these things. Go ahead, gentlemen. Oh, right, yeah.
No, thank you. Oh, thank you. Very interesting
And
talk.
sorry, if I could just ask you to identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Syed Abbas, ex-professor. I was not sure where you were going until you start speaking of republicanism, and from Socrates, from Athens, democracy was the rule of the godless moneyed, and republic was the rule of the God-fearing learned. But today, I think you speak of small government, and Heilbronner, he argues that the government was necessary to check in big business, So, and the trouble with the terminology is from 1920 to 1932, under the three Republican presidents of Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, the parties switched roles. The Democrats began to push for republic, and Republicans for democracy of the moneyed. What is republicanism today, and how would it solve the problem of Gaia and Homo sapiens?
Should I do them one at a time?
Well, why don't we start with one at a time, and
Okay.
then if we see a lot
Okay.
of hands, we'll collect some questions.
Republicanism, I did broach the subject, but saying anything about it, quickly becomes mired in this fact that we have these groups in the real world that call themselves Republicans that go about and do things on the one hand, and then on the other hand we have this body of thought which is republicanism, and of course that body of thought also has a lot of plurality in it. But when I say republicanism, I mean a res publica, a thing of the publics, the organs of the regime, the Constitution, the configurations of authority are in the service ultimately of the basic interests of the people as a whole, and that this tradition, has been associated with liberalism, with democracy, evolving various architectures of power, of power restraint. Excuse me. And I should note that the capitalism, another large topic here. You talk about the Republican Party in the United States, property, the inequality issue, the stratification that occurs. Someone said, it's easier to imagine the end of the earth than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And capitalism comes in many varieties, and capitalism, the key pieces of it, property and so forth, are not absolutes. They're bundles of rights and responsibilities. And capitalism, properly tooled, is regulated, the political parameters of property and other facets. You get that right, and it's a very positive feature. So when I say I'm a planetary Republican, I am definitely not of the sort of socialist or we're going to get rid of capitalism school of thought. There's a whole conversation to be had about all of that. That was pretty incoherent, wasn't it?
Okay. Other questions? So, okay. Sure. There's two people there lined up behind each other. Sure, the person in front and then the person behind.
Do I identify myself or?
If you could, just so Dan knows who's speaking to him.
Yeah. I'm Chris Gerard, high school student, grade 12 currently. So I just wanted to know, you were talking about how we're on a raft and how we are steering down a whole river or streams. What would be the steering mechanism in this case? Would it be technological innovations, government? What do you think?
Good question.
Grade 12. Thank you.
Great. Why don't we take the question behind as well, get the two questions on the table, and then Dan can think about a response. Yeah, terrific question.
Sure. Hi, Dan. Dan Adal, professor here at the Monk School and in political science. My question isn't as smart as his, but I wanted to ask for you to comment on something that you kind of hinted at, that technological innovation has evolved alongside political innovation for the majority of human history, but we seem to have gotten to a point where technological innovation has far outpaced our ability to imagine new forms of political organization. We seem to be stuck in a mode of political organization that we can't get past, right? And we thought that with the invention of nuclear weapons that we were going to get maybe some form of global governance that you've talked about and Campbell Craig and others have suggested, but we seem to be unable to imagine our way out of this box that we're in. Can you comment a bit on why you think that we might eventually get past that?
Well, I'll take these questions in reverse order, if that's okay. One way to put your point is that there is, a great discrepancy between the progress with regard to science and technology, which has been like, trigonometry, calculus, advanced, mathematics. But when it comes to politics, we're still at addition, and subtraction, and over time, the gap is growing, between the sophistication of our scientific, technological, and the unsophistication of our societal, orders. And there's no doubt that that is the case. And so the question becomes, how do we, move forward? And most importantly, my thought is that in the past, orders were built on the basis of asymmetries of power and coercion. The operating manual for archipelago Earth and global Earth was real statism. Okay, the package of practices and behaviors and institutional arrangements, that we associate with the state and the interstate system and all of the things that go on in interstate systems, and that has been, it's very deeply ingrained, and it's not going to be easy to change that. But one of the key features that's new is that we really can't coerce in the same way that was the case in the past, right? That, and this is a sort of another effect of the nuclear revolution and comparable revolutions, is that there's been a diffusion of capacity, into the hands of, how many actors. I mean, how many countries could have nuclear weapons and thus a deterrent, of some sort, if they wanted to? And well, Israel and North Korea, have pretty impressive nuclear arsenals, and they're tiny little countries, okay? And so, who knows? Many dozens of countries could have nuclear weapons, but they don't. And also, of course, we've got this leakage problem into the hands of non-state actors. So that coercion becomes very, very difficult. And in a situation of coercion, and this actually takes us back to why republicanism, the only source of change, the only way in which we can get things done is through agreement. Right? We have to have negotiated agreement, right? And there's all these veto points, so everyone has got the ability to not go along. And in that situation, the only path is to have conversations in which we attempt to come to a consensus. And my thought is that the process of doing that should start with this geography. Can we agree about where we are? Can we agree about the contours of material reality as it is? Right? Can we agree on geography? Can we have a geographic consensus? And of course, the other part of this type of exercise of looking at these is the idea that we could have a geographic narrative. Many of these were intended from Spaceship Earth, Global Village, that could be the basis for vernacular mental maps, right? That could be effectively universal, and that, like other mental maps, and that of the state, states teach geography, the world with lines, and so forth. What if we had, a mutual agreement that everyone would study or be taught, the same geography? So that's my thought of how this can work. And the other point is that the getting things right is a key part of this. That we don't have to have agreement on first principles or on the agreement of what the preferred life is like. But we do have to have, sewers and, roads and, if we want to have lighting, we got to have, electricity grids and so forth. And that type of pragmatic materiality, in the service of, stuff we want, we're actually very good at doing that, and we do that at the local level. And that we need to approach this set of problems with that mentality.
Okay. We have a trio of political scientists sitting in the front row, I think each of which have questions. I'm not sure, but, sorry? Oh, did you address the
Oh, yes,
first
sorry.
question?
Sorry, steering. Well, everyone's going to have to be crew. Everyone's going to have to basically have crew-like roles. And so, people have to assume responsibility for their, actions and the consequences of their actions is an important part of this. But, you ask what is steering more concretely with regard to politics. Well, the word government comes from a medieval Latin word, gubernaculum, which means steering, as in a boat, right? So what we mean by steering is what we mean by government, okay? And this is Republican government in the sense that it is configured so that the exercise of power is used overall on behalf of the core interest of the whole. And we have laws, and we enforce laws, and we have, police, and we have, various forms of, information access and so forth. At the same time that we protect, other dimensions of it. We think about, the global, our village where we live, our homes. We have a lot of privacy regimes, okay? Much of it's sort of normative, but it's also in the law. I can't decide to sort of barge into your house and go through and be taking, pictures of everybody, right? Or come in and take, all of the documents that are there. So we have, that levels of restraint and institutionalization at that scale. And so we just do that, on a larger scale. That's what we have to do.
Okay, thank you. So let's have the last group of questions here at the front.
Well, thank you, Dan. So I guess one unfortunate part about human nature is that we tend to have all these bad characteristics. We're, full of paranoia and cruelty and all sorts of phobias and things that cause problems for social order. And I guess over time, different functions have kind of tempered that in various ways. So you have myths and taboos, and arguably religion played a role in creating that kind of don't do this, and keep people in line. And for Republicans, as far as I understand, that's why there's been attention paid to civic virtue and personal restraints. And I'm wondering how you think we solve that problem on a planetary scale. I could see how it could be done at a certain period of time when you had centralized mass broadcasting, everyone listening to the same or watching the same shows, reading the same things. But now we have this, you'd think we'd be able to do it because we have a planetary noosphere, but we seem more than ever to be driven apart and all sorts of irrational disinformation spreading and so on. How do you propose to solve that problem?
We just put these three together. Can you
I think
hold
that's a good
That's
idea.
question number one. My comment could be put as a question, but I'll just keep it as a comment. I think this is the best question, and you answered it very well. But when I try to think about what does this actually look like, I'm closer to the ground. I need a model, and you gave us a model in a nice article that you and John Eikenberry wrote for foreign policy, just in the early days of the Biden administration. And you used it was about Franklin Roosevelt. So you could say Franklin Roosevelt was a great Republican president, small r, right? And there was a great Republican president, if you want to model, in Abraham Lincoln. Those are probably the only two models. Now, watch how they governed. It wasn't a hierarchical, here we go, boys, let's go. It was, don't make me make a decision. I don't want to make this decision, right? Go out and force me to make the decision. Build the coalition that's going to, I know where you want me to go, and I know where we should go, but I can't get there if it's just me, right? And I won't stay in power very long if it's just me. I've got a bunch of elites I have to deal with in a context of self-restraint and mutual respect and civic virtue. Now, the idea that we can't replicate that at the global level, why? Why? And they don't all have to be Democrats, and they don't all have to come out of the same traditions. They just have to want to get a few things done for the species. Now, I can easily imagine a few Franklin Roosevelts in the room, not agreeing on everything, but finally agreeing that we need to get somewhere together. And we have models in history.
My name is Franklin Griffiths. I am a long retired emeritus. I may have some merit left, maybe, but I'd like to really be brief if I can and say I feel there's an emergency that we're in the midst of, and we have to ask why raftcraft, if that's the right word, is not progressing more rapidly, why we're not doing better. And there's a lot of answers and ways to go about this. But I would say the discourse, the way we talk and think about all this stuff needs to be changed. It needs to be examined first. And right away, without going into any detail, I'd say one thing only, which is we are talking as though we and everyone in the world is reasonable, that reason prevails. And we've heard a talk just now in which reason prevails or should prevail. I say this is inadequate. There has to be room created for emotion, for feeling. And if you don't feel, if the heart is not in, if the body is not in, the mind won't be able to do it alone. So I believe there's a new discourse, a new way of talking about this stuff that needs to come forward. We could talk about where it might come from, but I think a need is there.
Yeah, those are great questions. Let me do them in reverse order, if that's okay. I agree about discourse, and I agree about emotions. That this is a rationalist, and of course I haven't gotten into the actual in the talk, the focus on getting people to do things. This is just my thought about a descriptive, accuracy set of points. And when one looks at getting to where we want to go and the features of it being sustainable, I do think that various forms of, I don't know what the exact language, earth spirituality, earth religion, earth sacred, and this oasis earth, type of thinking is, sort of foundational to it or leads to it or adds credibility to it. But and this is next point, is that when one actually looks at the world at the level of sort of political activism and contestation and people who are actually dealing with stuff, of trying to deal with these things, you can really claim that there is now an alternative, still minority, but an alternative civilization that is emergent on the planet. And I call it Greenpeace, civilization. And it's civilization because it answers all of the questions in all of the boxes. It has it has a sort of template or answer. And of course, one of them is cosmology, and that's related to this. But there also is a spirituality and the sort of religion dimension that religio is bounding back, tying back, and the devotion, respect, the sacred, and all of that has been part of human cultures. And one of the ways in which it has been mobilized is through rituals, where there are symbolic actions, behaviors that are unintelligible as kind of directly pragmatic material. And I think that that's really important. And I think that the states, that the states get that. Monarchy certainly did. And that we need to have, we need to get like, and Burning Man type things, are, works in progress, Earth First type meeting, works. There's a lot of neo-indigenous work of this sort, connecting to, radical political agendas in many, dispersed parts of the world. The resistance, to the next pipeline and so forth, and this cultural revival. And we have to have a mashup here. We have to have a cultural appropriation, put it all together and start, stirring it up. That everyone, we have to move towards recognition of universal indigeneity, and the indigenous as it's not new religion. It's the very oldest religions, actually. So I'm very into that, and I also the paideia, education. The young, and this has always been recognized. That we want to have the best and the most appropriate, and then that they become educated, drawn out, but also schooled and socialized in these ways. This is not we don't have time for anarchy. Okay, this is not everyone's going to do their own thing sort of model. Second, Lou, yeah, you're very much on the same wavelength here. We can do this, we have done this, and we do have these templates. And when I say, I go back to the village and the neighborhood, the municipal, and then I say, all I have to do is scale it up. Well, we actually have been scaling it up. And that's precisely what you were talking about, which is that we had, this mid-20th century crisis, or we had it, early in the Civil War. It's not just the core leaders, as you say, it's elites. And this is the agenda that I would very briefly lay out for. We have an oligarchy, it is a plutocratic oligarchy, and we need to, have alterations in the distribution of wealth, but there's still going to be significant uneven distribution. And so what we really need to do, and think about Bill Gates, as a model, or the sort of, to get to the point, we need to have aristocraticizing agenda. That people, in ancient Athens, when they had lots of money, they had contests, and who could put on the best, festival for the gods, or who, would contribute the fastest trireme, to the city, right? And so there were contests of excellence and an ethos that those who have more responsibility to do more. And I think that is something that a lot of people who are part of the oligarchic plutocracy, I think that's a very appealing, notion to them. And many of them are, of course, already getting it and doing it in various ways. But that would be, in terms of a sort of cultural hegemony, within that strata. That's where we need to go. And you also say to these people, look, unless you guys do this to a first approximation, it's not going to get done, okay? It's not going to be from pressure from below, okay? That's a factor, right? But that's not going to be we can't wait for the revolution, okay? Plus you guys don't really want a revolution, right? So we need, step up. You guys have got the most to lose, right? Now, of course, some of them think that they can escape, but I don't think that's actually something that most of them do think. Okay, Ron, human nature, paranoia, cruelty, phobias, definitely the case. The crooked timber of humanity. And that's not going to change. I mean, we do have this, one of the slides that's got transhumanism in it, right? And there is this set of arguments, which is that, well, the one part that needs to be upgraded that we haven't upgraded is the human part. And it will make people so that they will be more cooperative, so that they will, not be as violent, et cetera, so that we will, sort of manipulate the mix, in human nature. That's not going to happen within the scale of time that we're talking about here. And doing that is going to involve all sorts of, really difficult questions, and will be a source of conflict as well. So we have to use the old methods, the sort of equivalent of plant breeding, that we, recognize that civilization. I talk about Republican restraints. Republican restraints are a subset of sort of civilizational restraints that define all cultures. Norbert Elias, that the individuals are brought into and socialized entails learning and internalizing what and the question then for us becomes, can we, the pattern of restraints, what activities are we want to be restraining? And the subset of the full restraints is restraints that serve the public, fundamental public interests. That's not all restraints.
Okay. Well, I think I hope that I can speak for everyone that it is actually quite gratifying to see where the conversation ended up. I mean, during the talk, Professor Deudney repeatedly said, or I heard him say, that he was hopeful. As I was listening to the talk, it was challenging to be hopeful, given the geographies that you went over, and yet where we ended up was a discussion of not solutions, but a discussion of the elements, of things we needed to think about, of how there is agency, even though it might be extremely challenging for all the reasons that were discussed. So thank you very much, Professor Deudney, for a very stimulating and hopeful talk about our current predicament, and thanks to all of you.